Today we have Dvir Mitsari from Wix, and we're going to be talking about financial engineering at Wix. Dvir, I'll leave it over to you. Maybe let's start a little bit about your background and then what Wix does, and then we're going to dive in right into everything you're doing over there, the exciting stuff.
It is exciting stuff. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, so thank you for having me. So my name is Dvir. I joined Wix 5.5 years ago-ish. To implement FinOps culture. My background is technical. I used to be a DevOps engineer, and we came to build that practice from the ground up, from the engineering side to management. And what else? I'm a subject matter expert for Cloud Financial Management in Amazon. I was part of the people who wrote the certification. Also, a huge advocate, and I have a lot of content online with mostly in Hebrew, unfortunately, but about FinOps. It's one of my passions. I really love this job. And, we keep finding new ways to innovate how we approach cost optimization and get that financial KPI into place.
Yeah. And when we talked today, one of the things I want to dive into is the difference between FinOps and financial engineering, as you put it. And I think that's going to be the exciting part of this interview. Can you, just for people for context, can you talk a little bit about Wix? I know what Wix does. Some other people may not. And then I may share some investor information that's publicly available because it blew my mind. But I'll let you talk first what you guys do, and then we can share that.
Wix is an amazing company. It is, and first and foremost because of the people working here, and I really love here. But we're a website building company, meaning that we give web presence to small businesses, to individuals, to companies around the world, over 190 countries. I think that we're above 200 million users today. And it's amazing because the technological stack that we use in order to serve content to those people and in order to keep performance in check, and the features set that we have more than 1,000 innovative features across Wix, more than 50,000 builds per day, which is insane. And our scale is just amazing, and the way that we approach things like performance and giving people their content as soon as possible in a reliable way create a huge technical challenge for us, not just from the financial side, but also from how we approach our architecture in a way that we won't suffer downtime like every 5 minutes because of our scale.
Yeah, I when preparing for this interview, I did a little bit of research, obviously, and I want to share. This is the Wix's public investor deck. You can go to their website and find it and download it, right? And I wanted to show people a little bit. I mean, it blew my mind how big you guys are, right? Like, so you mentioned 200 million. It's 220. You've grown 10% since then. It's crazy, right? Over 5,900 employees, so approaching the 6,000, I would assume. Even it's mind blowing, the scale. And I do want to share some of the innovation you have built, because I think it shows the amount of growth you have to handle and still be efficient, right? I guess this is your platform, but there was one really striking chart in there. Yeah, here, this is your product chart, where like all these things that Wix is building and launching from 2015, the Wix editor. Okay, you built your website, but I mean, it's just mind blowing the amount of innovation that Wix is bringing to the market, and then how that translates into revenue. And then, I think we can stop sharing here, but I'll take the ARR expansion. It's just like it keeps going up and up and up and up. You're innovating, you're bringing new revenue, users are happy. What's not to like? This is fantastic, right? And so doing my research, I was blown away how innovative this company is. So that was for me the insight. But if you can talk a little bit about maybe like the stack and then how it all ends up on your plate, because you're in charge of financial engineering, right? It's like the house has to be in order.
Yeah, so it's quite a challenge, as you could probably imagine, because alongside our cloud and infrastructure that we manage, we have to manage a lot of network activities around the world. We have to manage monitoring systems and how we monitor our application, our performance, how we monitor our POPs or the CDN, and how we can, jump between the two and understand the pricing models for each service that we use. We use dozens of services across the different clouds and different services and vendors that offering us different tools to manage that. And it is create kind of a huge technological stack that you have to understand, not just from the pricing model, but from the technical side, how the architecture is actually built and what is, talking with each other to understand when you do a change here, how will it affect different kind of tools and monitoring systems that you have. And it's quite challenging, because everything that we touch has an implication on our ecosystem. And it's amazing, and scary to see at times, but it is kind of add to the excitement of innovating, because when you release so many features and when you develop and you want to reach to that point of a company that, feature doesn't matter, right? And it's a point when, you need an Excel, you open an Excel, you don't care if Excel added a new feature to Excel, right? Yeah. You just open Excel. So I think that in the vision, in the long run, this is where I want Wix to be. That feature doesn't matter. And when you approach that, it's kind of scary to understand like how to manage and govern all those changes that affect inherently the cost of our operational cost or the total cost of ownership, for example. Like how do you calculate that? And it's mind blowing.
Yeah, let's talk about of metrics a little bit later. Wix runs on AWS. Is that a correct assumption?
We're multi-cloud. So we use AWS, GCP. We used to work with also Microsoft Azure, but not in that large of a capacity today.
Got it. So you're running on two clouds, AWS and GCP.
Yep.
Was there a specific decision like, oh, we like AWS for running our production infrastructure, but we really like the analytics part of GCP, or was it a different reason for going multi-cloud?
By the way, this is a great question, because you specifically touch something that is advocating for multi-cloud, like use specific services that are better in a different cloud. But in a huge discussion of do you need multi-cloud or not, we had several criteria. One of them was cost, but the others were a technological stack that the GCP offered us that AWS was a bit behind, and vice versa, like different services that we used on AWS that were far more advanced than what GCP could offer.
Interesting. Yeah. And I imagine like a company at the scale of Wix, it's just like individual teams probably want to make those decisions and they have these preferences for these different types of services. Is that?
Well, this is interesting because Wix is built with a company, as different companies internally. And we do have like a main kind of guild for infra across the board. But there are teams that are using their own DevOps to manage their own infrastructure. So the decision is purely based on the people and the teams that are managing that activity, but with the guidance and best practices of what we share. Like we have a solution architect and we have me as a FinOps to share the cost KPI and to create the models. So it's kind of there is a process of provisioning new agendas, where, why, and how. And it's being decided mostly by the same people, but sometimes by different people.
Got it.
I hope it's clear without getting into too much details.
Yeah. This is perfect. And can we talk? I always call it the upstream part, like the upstream part of provisioning infrastructure, building everything. Before we get into the financial engineering part, can we talk a little bit about the specific, like, people, process, technology, right? Can we talk a little bit about the specific services that matter for Wix? Is it video? Is it hosting? Is it like, and how do you provision all of that? And how do you teach your people to interact with those services?
I think this is an amazing question, and I don't think we have the time to go over each activity. Because as I said, we're not working as a linear kind of production line. We have different agendas that need different tools. And as I said, we use dozens of tools across the board, internally in Amazon and in GCP. So different kind of tools for different kind of agendas. And some are monitoring, some for serving content and video, some are in charge of calculating lifecycle policies for sites. And we have a lot of content, and we have a lot of compute power to generate and to support all the requests that we're getting. And we have CDN, of course, because gotta have content delivered everywhere. But again, I can't go too much into details to the specific services that we use. This is the Wix policy. That tomorrow there will be a security breach in one of them, and people know that.
Totally understand. Yeah.
We
okay.
Kind of keep it on the download.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Great. And we shared the product slide. There's so many products that Wix is supporting, so many lines of business. I assume the whole hey, we're hosting video or website content. I would assume at this point, you're just a broad user of pretty much every service that the clouds offer under the sun. So let's run with that assumption.
Not the hundreds of services, but definitely dozens.
Yeah. And okay, so maybe then, so you've been with Wix for, you said 5 years, I believe, right?
A bit more, yeah, around 5.5 years.
5.5 years, right? And so, we showed the product chart. Let's go back to all the way 2015 and all the products that have launched. And then when you joined and you were tasked with looking after financial engineering, can you share a little bit about what was going on? You were growing. Why now? What was happening that made it where somebody said, hey, we need somebody like Dvir to look into finance here? Can you share a little bit about that? What was going on?
It was amazing. I have a huge story about that, but I don't want to take too much of the time. But my manager who recruited me to Wix was the same manager who recruited me to my previous role. And he called me one day and he said, listen, we were looking for, I don't know how to call it, because 5.5 years ago, no one called it FinOps, right? We didn't have FinOps Foundation. We didn't have anything. We had cloud analyst, and we had that role. People done it. But the term FinOps was not around, at least not that I could find it, because I've looked the definition of what he presented to me. And he said, and this is what I love about Wix, by the way, because innovation side, we are thinking 5 years ahead. And we knew that we wanted to shift from, we used to run an on-premises solution, and we want to move to the cloud. And one of the challenges they mapped before moving to the cloud was that there is a lot of pricing models and a lot of services, and there is no actual governance. So the procurement process is dead. It's not like I need an additional server. Let's run it through a procurement process and get the CFO approval and order new hardware, and it's a CapEx, right? Now it's an OpEx, and everyone can click a button, spin up 100,000 instances, and they understood the financial risk about that. And when he presented this role, that's actually why they brought me, because we were in the middle of moving to the cloud. And one of the challenges were the actual cost monitoring of what we use. Do we utilize the best service or the best pricing? And where should we provision our infrastructure? And to understand if we're migrating properly. Make sense?
Got it. Okay.
But this is why I came to Wix. Since then, it just grew, and a lot of hats were added during that time.
Yeah. And you dropped the soundbite at the very beginning of this call. You said you wrote the certification for, was it?
So Google calls it FinOps. So GCP, Google Cloud calls it FinOps, but Amazon adopted a term called Cloud Financial Management. And there is something called SME, which is a subject matter expert. And they took everyone that, were very dove deep into the pricing models and understood how the cloud works and technical differences between how to utilize different services and in different areas, and how to make the best financial choice out of 10 solutions that solve your problem technically. So to simplify what I said, if you have 10 ways to solve a problem and 2 of them were optimally financially optimized, then they took all the people that knew how to solve that by choosing those 2. And we were gathering in Israel. There was it was around the world. And in Israel, I think there were like 30 people that wrote the certification questions. So we gathered and, pitched ideas on how to approach different services and how to solve different problems using the financial KPI, how to approach them. And we wrote down the questions, and it's part of the certification that Amazon will release to be certified as a CFM practitioner.
Oh, financial management practitioner. Okay. What a soundbite. But it's good.
I don't know if they call it like that. I don't know if they released it yet, but it was, I think, before COVID. And I think that if you want to be a CFM certified in Amazon, it's a new certification, then it's a test, then you're going to answer some of my questions, which is cool.
But that's great, right? That has a huge impact on the industry. It's also good to hear that they went to a customer versus using a product manager of certain services. So this is real world impact. Yeah. Okay. So in your view, what has changed in the world of infrastructure that has then created the need for something like a financial management practice or financial engineering or FinOps? Like, what has changed? Because we see it everywhere right now on LinkedIn. So what's changed? Why now? Why is it so important now?
Well, cloud adoption is at its peak, I think, because people, even you see industries that you never thought will move to the cloud. You see government moving to the cloud. And those industries are adding revenue and adding traction. And people just understand that, again, eventually the procurement process is dead. And when the old world, when you wanted additional hardware, it was a very closed process. And when you approach purchasing or procurement in the cloud, it's very open. It's like a supermarket where people go in, take whatever they want, leave without entering the registers, and at the end of the day and the end of the month, you get like a huge bill for all the customers billed to your account. So I think understanding that creates that need for someone to govern that. And I'm using governed with a disclaimer because there is no actual governance from the financial side, and we can talk about it later if you want. Mm-hmm. But there is no governance. If it came to the billing and you approach it from the billing and you got alerted from the billing, then it's too late, right? It already happened. So you didn't govern anything. Mm-hmm. What you want to do, and again, we can discuss in details later, mm-hmm. is to prevent it, because every dollar that you properly optimized or designed or created a better architecture before you provisioned it is a dollar saved. And that approach of being proactive is something that's, I think, create a lot of difference between the FinOps best practices, which is handling workloads that are already provisioned on the cloud. And that's a practice you build ground up from the engineering team into a strategy and changing the mindset and creating culture, being proactive and prevent provision waste in the first place.
Yeah. When I read your blog posts and everything you publish on LinkedIn, in fact, that's a theme I've spotted in your content that you talk about. You have to enable the people at the beginning. You need to create awareness. So that's and to position that versus FinOps, from how I understand FinOps is going post-provisioning, going in, trying to understand, do we need this resource? Is there value into it, right? And so it's a pretty involved process of looking at tools and people and everything. You switched it on its head. You said, no. We got to talk to the people before they provision. Broadly correct? Is that?
Education, exactly. Mm-hmm, that is very accurate. Because once people are educated, and I think that's the difference between FinOps and financial engineering. This is why we call it that. We don't come to people saying you're wasting money. we're coming to people and you're saying you're practicing bad engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of your tool set as a good engineer, there are a lot of KPIs that you have to measure, right? You have to measure your code quality. You have to measure your performance. You have to measure your reliability and redundancy and make sure that everything works perfectly. Why not cost? What makes you a better engineer than to choose the right solution that will solve the problem in the most optimized way, which is all the KPIs that you measure already, but cost as well. And when you change that mindset and you say, I want you to be a better engineer, then it's changing the way that we approach cost. Because if you come to a DevOps engineer and say, how much your solution cost? He'll say, I don't know. But the fact is he should, right?
Yeah.
It's part of his tool set. He's part of being a good engineer, right? Yeah. He should adopt. You don't have to have one FinOps in the company that is in charge of cost. This is the engineering. You have to have everyone as a advocates for the cost KPI, mm-hmm. and people should treat it. I'm sorry, as an engineering KPI, not a financial KPI. And that shift of mindset did a lot of wonders how we approach things at Wix.
Mm-hmm. And that shift of mindset, I want to contrast that with the supermarket analogy you used. And when I talk to engineering teams, what I hear is they do want to give their developers liberal permissions, so they can just go develop, experiment, and everything. And that's usually what's leading to all the sprawl and unused resources. And then you went in and said, guys, you have these KPIs. I'm going to give you a fifth one, which is cost, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to make it a good engineering practice. How did you accomplish that? Because I look again, you have 6,000 people almost, right? And I'm going to do some rough calculation. 20% of those are engineers. So let's say 1,200 engineers. You need to a lot more. Oh, there you go. Right. So even more. How do you teach them? How do you get that mindset from? And you started day one, and these people were just spinning up resources. How did you accomplish that?
Okay, so this is a great question, and I'm going to share a bit of trades of the secret.
Okay.
Let's begin at the beginning.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Great.
We understood at first that it was only me, and we understood that one man can't really handle everything. And once that realization came to mind, we understood that we needed pillars in each company, or people that will be my delegates across Wix to spread the word. And then we realized it's not enough, because education is not enough when you don't have the tools that you use in production to measure it, right? And what we came upon is, in order not to hurt dev velocity, we didn't create a huge process of approvals and next, and you have to fill up forms. And no, that wasn't the direction. What we wanted to do is to simulate the freedom of choosing. As you said, in the supermarket, when you go into the supermarket, all I asked them was to not pick up the first product they see, but to browse the products, right? To find out what will solve the problem with the lowest price tag. And everyone does it, right? I mean, you go into the supermarket and you see 2 cartons of milk, and one is more affordable than the other. And you say, well, there is not such a difference. Let's pick up that. That's the mindset that I want to give my engineers. And to do that, we actually implemented the same process in production for financial incidents. And we educate them also through their success stories, but not just. We also educated them through their incidents. And once there is a financial incident, meaning there is a misconfiguration, or someone click on a button it shouldn't have, or change something in Terraform that it shouldn't have, and there is an incident, and I can give you dozens of examples. Mm-hmm. We literally open a production post-mortem, and there is an incident report that we have to fill. And it's not hurting dev velocity because it's after the fact. But once all the team that is in charge of that specific agenda sits around and create that incident report, and we do a post-mortem, how can we avoid such a thing? How can we, what kind of information were you missing when you provisioned that agenda? Or how can we better design or implement it? Who should you talk to? How can we make this process better for you guys as a team? As I said, we have many peers that we're working with. So everyone, not every problem, a hammer and a nail. I don't remember how that goes. But every team that was in charge of a specific incident, we actually sat with them. We did a post-mortem and we, improved the process. So the next time they wanted to provision a new agenda or create something, they kept in mind, like, I don't want to cause an incident. I want to be recognized as a success story. And it's, it's being published to management, like our success stories. If you're able to save money, if you're able to improve the workload with less cost, if you optimize your workload in some manner. So we created those user stories to create engagement, but those incidents were treated the same as production ones. And it created a mindset for the engineers that the process for financial KPI is implemented through their day-to-day. It was part of their process, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
And you made it a success story, right? So what wasn't a post-mortem incident report, you turned it into a success story.
If they did things right the next time.
If they did it right the next time. Yeah. Well, I'm looking at that because I think this is, like, for me, talking to you right now, this is sort of the aha moment where you're not coming in from the KPI side or the tool side. You're coming in from the people side, right? And you're changing their mindset. You're educating them. Look, people make mistakes, right? It happens all the time. But then when they learn from the mistakes and apply those learnings, then you celebrate that, right? And so it really caters to human nature. Like, hey, you want to advance in your career, you want to grow, here's a success story, right? So that for me right now is the aha moment. You're coming in from the people side and not like, here's a great FinOps tool, right?
I think that what separates financial engineering from FinOps, because the engineering side is to talk their language. And the FinOps is just, for me, at least, terminology wise, it's just best practices. Like, how do we optimize workload? Like, how do we run optimally? It's super important. I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just saying it's not enough. It's the first phase. Mm-hmm. Like, if you let people study 3 months the best practices of running the cloud based on your pricing models and financial plans, like 3 months, it's a 3 months course, even less. And you have FinOps you have a FinOps a FinOps guy in the company that can look at the you're running on a different region. You should probably reduce the AZ traffic. You should right size, right family, life cycle policies, and make sure that you monitor your CloudWatch metrics. Mm-hmm. It's quite simple, right? But it's best practice. Yeah. If you want to create a culture or a cultural change in your organization, it's not enough to build it from ground up, and it's not enough to build it just from top down. You have to have both collide, like build it from the engineering team, speak their language, create the same process as a production process from the financial side, but build also a strategy. Create those. By the way, a huge shout out to my employee, Ziva, the one I manage. Created a newsletter every month to send to management, a CFO, and the VP R&D and head of infrastructure group, and everyone that is involved in oversighting the budget. And in this new newsletter, we actually share the success stories for the different users. So it's being published to management, and we have our KPIs there and make sure that everything aligned and everything in the budget. But also we share the user stories that we had and the agendas that they helped us to optimize. Right. So as you said, if you're coming from the people, it's better because it's a dollar you haven't provisioned yet in the cloud. If you're coming from the tools and pricing models, then you're already working on a waste. And it's important, but you should also work on preventing it in the first place.
Yeah. So you have both then, right? So you have something you have all the culture and the tooling and the education that you just talked about, that's built. But then you also have something that people would consider the classic FinOps, like post-provisioning, like let's figure out how we can optimize things, right? Interesting.
Yeah,
so you do both.
I developed my own tool. So we're using an in-house tool that we developed. It integrates with CUR, with Dvir, with CloudWatch, with our own Prometheus, using the SDK to get real-time information from our provisioning. And it's doing quite a lot of things. It also implements the best practices, so detached DPS, AP allocation, whatever, and whatnot. And the same, it also generates anomaly alerts, and it generates actionable KPIs and actionable dashboards. And it's something, by the way, that from our growth, we started by creating visibility, which is important. But then we understood that we were looking at things and we couldn't find anything. And we moved from creating dashboards for visibility to creating actionable dashboards, like show me where the anomaly is, show me what I need to look at. And this change of mindset also helped us from the FinOps side. I'm sorry.
Interesting. So you're looking at changes in your infrastructure over time and how that impacts financial KPIs, really, the anomalies. Yeah. I do want to dive into that tool in a second here. Before we do that, if you can talk about it, because that's.
I want to really the open source, but I don't have the time. So
yeah. How did you get management buy-in? I feel like this is such an important part, because if you give it visibility to management and they care, like, how did you accomplish that? And what are the questions they ask and they want to know? Okay,
so I want to separate my answer to two parts, because when you say management, we have a lot of management at Wix. Not everyone's engaged with a financial KPI. Not everyone's engaged with what we do. I think the one that is mostly engaged with it is our CFO. And we have a process, a monthly process. We have the newsletter and we have reporting, but we also have a direct line to him. If there is, for example, an incident, then that no one is taking care of, and there is a huge cost impact for that. And I think one of the things that you aim for is to have that mandate to pull the plug. And today, to be honest, I don't have it at Wix. And I aim to have it. We talked about it before the recording a bit about my plan for the innovative new company that I want to open.
Yeah.
But ideally, what we want to have for management is the ability to change priority and to pull the plug. And both of them currently I don't have. What I can do is to engage with him very freely about things that are bothering, things that are impacting the budget, and he's very correspondent. Like he can answer like on a Friday night and say, "I'm going to take care of it," and the engagement is real there, and I think there is a lot of will to enable us to do what we want to do and to make sure that we're optimized. And the engagement for management, it took a while to get. It took a lot of bad things to happen, so they'll realize the importance of what we do. And then when we saw how we mitigated it and how we saved a lot of money, then the realization was that, okay, this is crucial and very important. It's not just nice to know or nice to have or FYI. It's something that we actually have to engage. And that's something from management, something from our CFO, that he had to engage with our VP R&D, with the engineers. And, you can very see it this year, for example, because we aim to do better this year from the engagement side. And that's why I talk with you about, creating this whole FCOE kind of company.
Yeah, the Financial Center of Excellence. We'll have to talk about that in a second session. Like, I'm curious what you're going to do there. And this seems like a mundane question, but how do you communicate with your CFO? Is it Slack? Is it email? Is it a phone call? How do you, and what dashboards is your CFO looking at?
Wow, all the above. I even have a WhatsApp messages from him whenever he wants. Because it has to be an open communication channel, because you want him engaged. The last thing you want to do is to come to your CFO at the end of the month and telling him like there was an impact and you didn't know about it. So there's a factor of trust here. He trusts me with the budget. He trusts me with monitoring it and make sure that we're aligned. But he also trusts me to, raise the flags when something is not according to plan. And I trust him to engage, to correspond to that, and to help me achieve that mitigation of governance according to the use case. It can be, right?
And then so what type of, I want to peel the onion. Like I'm thinking your CFO looks also at some sort of dashboard, right? So, and then let's peel the onion from that dashboard, the KPIs they're looking at, down to the data acquisition for those dashboards, right? And so let's start with that maybe. So what type of dashboards and KPIs does your CFO look at?
Okay, so first of all, we have our cost dashboard across the clouds that my artifact generates, but I don't think he looks at it because he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
As I said, the collaboration is very tight, so we can. There are no surprises at the end of the month, so he doesn't have to go in the morning and look at the dashboards because the dashboards will show him a lot of information and no bottom line. Like he doesn't know if there was an incident. He doesn't know if the. Listen, I'm going to take a step back for a second and talk about the costs, because when you talk about scale, our scale, for example, and you add the new and exciting world of auto scaling groups, you see that seasonality, right? You see that there is a lot of traction during the midweek, and you see there is a reduction of instances, a reduction of traffic during the weekend. And when a CFO looks at it from the eagle's eye, it doesn't show a lot of information, right? It doesn't give him insight if that is the correct activity or if there's, you understand what I'm saying, right? Because it's not a graph that you see with one single bar that shows this is the cost and fine, right?
Yeah.
So those dashboards doesn't give us much value. So the collaboration has to be a bit more personal. But as I said, we do have a newsletter. So every once a month, we send a newsletter with all the information, all the KPIs, all the incidents that we discussed during the month, all the success stories that we help advance during the month, KPIs based on our collection, KPIs based on our user count. And, it has a lot of information that is very interesting to management and specifically to a CFO, but it also aggregates all the information that was already discussed during the months. So when our CFO review it, there shouldn't be any surprises there, and it gives him a lot of visibility on our activities and what was done. If we're on budget, we also have like a status bar with 100% and like a percentage of the budget. True story, like part of the newsletter, and we keep adding it in. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. And okay, so then, and by the way, this is something I hear a lot from CFOs. Yes, they have their dashboards, but they don't look at them, right? They only look at them when something goes wrong, right? Then
something, even engineers doesn't look at dashboards. Dashboard doesn't give you anything except visibility. And if you just need it as an FYI, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. If
you have an actionable dashboard, for example, saying there's a huge spike here that you should look at, then it's a different matter.
Yeah. And so from there, how do you acquire your data and also for your tools? And you mentioned a few things like CloudWatch. You probably use the Cur as well. Like, can you talk a little bit about all the data that goes into your system?
Sure. So there is a financial data, and there is let's call this an inventory data that I'm gathering from the different SDKs. It can be instances, volumes. It can be a lot of things. I don't want to go into too much details, but eventually it sums up to how we monitor our environment aligned with our business metrics, and I'll explain. One of the dashboards that we generated was to understand the usage of our instances based on our pod deployment topology in Kubernetes. So, for example, when I see a spike in Amazon on my application layer based on auto-scaling groups, the auto-scaling metric, I also see a dashboard right next to it showing the applications that scaled up. So I can go to the application owner and understand specifically like what caused the cluster to scale. We have a lot of information that is fixed to how Wix uses things and how we utilize different services. But eventually, what we want to see are the things that are not really optimized. I think I can I probably can't share, right? Because it has like resource IDs and all kind of metadata.
Yeah, let's not go there. Yeah.
but one of the dashboards that I really like, and it's something that I haven't seen, and I've consulted and tried, I think 80% of all the tools out there for financial engineer or FinOps. And I can tell you that all of them are going in the wrong direction, because all of them are generating a huge list of resources and give you like recommendation based on their resource specifically. And my problem is that when you approach it like that, you're missing the whole point of the cluster. You're missing a whole point of how you manage, many instances are under the same agenda. So we built a dashboard that is taking CPU utilization from CloudWatch, and it's taking disk and memory utilization from our own Prometheus. And it's aggregating all the metadata like business unit, and we have mandatory tags like business unit and service role that shows like what this resource is used for and whose team is the owner for it. And we can actually see our whole infrastructure from the compute side and disk and the metrics for utilization based on user-defined tags, for example. So I can search for a specific cluster, or I can search for a specific agenda and see all the resources under the same table with the utilization metrics, like in percentages, and everything is marked in red if it's under a specific volume or if it's under a specific value. And it's very easy to pinpoint different agendas that are underutilized and different agendas that and you're not working on a resource level anymore, right? You're working on an agenda. Like this agenda is underutilized. It's not just a specific resource. And it's very helpful to go to a team and say, don't handle one resource. Let's reconfigure the whole agenda and the way that we provision our infrastructure.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. Before I ask the follow-up questions, can we go a little bit over the hour? Do you have time after this, or do you have a hard? Okay, great. And so I want to drill down into two things you said. You said most of the tools go into the wrong direction because they give you a list of resources, and then you look at each individual resource, maybe with a recommendation. When we started talking, you also mentioned Terraform, and I assume you use Terraform, right, with provisioning. And so that means, and in general, cloud native infrastructure has a lot of implicit and explicit dependencies, right? Which makes this whole concept of looking at an individual resource without the context questionable, right? So, yeah,
and it's not just that. If I can add one more point to that, consider you have 10,000 resources, like 10,000 instances. What are you going to do? Like scroll a list of 10,000 instances and figure out what you have to do there? Like it doesn't scale, right?
At all. Yeah. That's right. So you instead then aggregate metrics that are relevant for you, like CPU usage or utilization, memory, maybe those types of things, right? Yeah. So you're almost running like your own ETL job for metadata from your infrastructure.
That's true. Give me 1 second, if that's fine.
Yeah.
Filter, give me 1 second.
I'll give you a minute for this because I can sense how this is going to be very exciting.
It's going to be cool. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay. Let's get this agenda. I'm just filtering, so it will be just a subset of the information.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. This is cool. Let me share my screen. I can't really, so if you give me just the permissions.
Oh, I need to give you permissions. How do I give you permission? I can guess I can give you, I'm going to make you a host. No, hold on. What do I do here? Give you permission. This is like the, I'm just going to make you a host and see what happens.
Let's see. Okay, I think I'm able to share my screen now. Yeah. Okay, so this is an example of a dashboard that we monitor our instances, exactly what I talked about. And it aggregates all the information from CloudWatch that is visible to us for disk and network. But it also gives us a lot of metadata, like what part of an auto-scaling group it is, or what kind of type it is, what's the normalization factor to filter large types if needed be, the cost, obviously. A trusted advisor and compute optimizer recommendations are going here from the cloud, from Amazon specifically, because it's an Amazon account. And what we filtered here is a specific service role called Oregon, which is a cluster running in Oregon, very original. And what's amazing here is we can also filter the free memory is above 75% and CPU utilization is below 0.2%, and see the list of instances that are underutilized. And that's a dashboard. That's an actionable dashboard that I can actually filter with out-of-the-box filters. And I can select specific instance to review. I can filter it from here, and it will be added to the filters, and we can see one instance as well. So if I'm filtered for that value, then we can see an overview of specific instance with all the information, with the network information and the disk utilization that we have, but also to pinpoint that specific resource, not just as a resource, but also as an agenda. So I can take this service role and I can go to the team that is the owner of that service role, which is mapped internally as part of our tags, mandatory tags. And we can, optimize this agenda that is currently not in use. Now, there's a good reason that is not in use, but that's the good example that I'm sharing now. And when I'm saying that we moved from visibility dashboard into actionable dashboard, those kind of filters, predefined filters, actually shows us the underutilized instances. And I think this is amazing, like approach, because you no longer have to review one resource, right? You can review all agendas, you can review clusters, and you can see the behavior of your auto-scaling groups. We have dozens of dashboards like that with a lot of information. Unfortunately, I didn't filter them, so I can show you more. It is pretty cool because that is why we come from the engineering side. Like we can, integrate with all kinds of services, with all kinds of API endpoints, gather a lot of information, aggregate it with the metadata that we gather from the cloud, and push everything with our business metrics and our KPIs, and make sure that everything running smoothly. And it's for any agenda.
Fascinating. So you get data from CloudWatch, you get metadata from your cloud resources.
Yeah.
I assume there's cost data in there as well from the Cur, or yeah. And then I think and this is not real time, right? This is probably something like an hour, a couple of.
Yeah, it's a snapshot, like a daily snapshot.
Yeah. It's a daily even snapshot, and that's good enough, right? That's good enough.
Listen, if you're gonna manage, I think tens of thousands of instances on an hourly basis, then you won't have capacity to do anything else.
It's impossible.
You're gonna have to, get kind of in alignment. Say, I'm gonna get the values, like the average values for the last week. That's what I'm showing, right, in the dashboard. So every day it will be updated. So it will correlate to the last week for any value. And then we can see a snapshot daily that is updated daily, but it gives me an overview, like how did this resource run? How did this resource run in the last week?
Yeah. And I'm asking because if you think about the two mindsets, on one end of the spectrum, you have like monitoring and security, and they need real time, right? Like we're talking seconds. And the other mindset is the FinOps mindset is like, I'm going to take the Cur at the end of the month, right? So that's like 30 days. One is like 1 second, and the other one is a month, right?
Okay,
and what
if you find a security breach through your cost, then it's way too late.
And then it's way too late. Then you got way bigger issues. Yeah. And what you have done now, so we talked about the people and the culture part. We talked about surfacing that information. But what you've done now is you have combined infrastructure data, metadata into one report, and you surface that on a daily basis by aggregating metrics, monitoring anomalies and changes in infrastructure. All these reports are actionable, right? Because I can go now after specific actions, and then there's further aggregation on a weekly basis. And that's good enough, way better than what exists out there right now.
Yep.
And it helps you to steer an entire company towards profitability and growth.
That's true. That is very accurate.
Okay,
but this is what you do, right? I mean, this is the whole point of this profession.
Yeah.
Our point is to make sure that we help our company grow.
And I find that a fascinating statement, because when you talk, maybe correct me here, but I see most FinOps practitioners today focusing on the cost aspect. I know they talk about value, or let's talk about value and if it makes sense to keep this resource running, but I feel like it was created with the mindset in cloud phase 1, where you had lift and shift and you still had your pet server in the cloud and you knew exactly its name. Like, will the traditional sense of FinOps, will it even hold true? Or I feel like the future belongs to financial engineering. And I may be preaching to the choir, but what's your take on that?
Well, I have a blog post, I think 3 years ago, saying that it has to come from the engineering side. Yeah. And I have a blog site that I'm managing, and a lot of nice blogs there. Not everything is on LinkedIn. And part of it was we should rebrand FinOps, because what we have to do, FinOps is a subset of financial engineering. It's part of it, right? It's as you said, it's the first phase. You learn 3 months, the best practices, the financial models, and the pricing plans for each one of the vendors and each one of the clouds. And you're there, right? All you have to do is have a brain and 2 hands. That's what you have to do. But when you talk about strategy, culture, and how to implement mindsets into the people, and when you talk about engagement, not just from the management side, not from the strategy side, but from the actual engineers before they provision the infrastructure. This is something that has to be discussed in an engineering language. You have to talk with them about incidents. You have to talk with them about post-mortems. You have to talk with them about processes. You have to talk about design. You have to talk about architecture, right? And it's a different kind of conversation when you say, listen, is your instance is compute optimized or memory optimized? It's a different kind of optimization when you say, before we discuss the kind of infra that you want to run on, tell me what challenge you want to solve. And then we can discuss it, right? Because everyone is so focused on solution-driven solutions, and they haven't stopped understanding what we're trying to solve first. And it might not be this instance or this instance. It might be a different solution altogether. And I think it's a common problem that I'm viewing, because I'm consulting to a lot of companies, and I see it everywhere. I see that people are coming with a solution. I need this because 1, 2, 3. It doesn't have a feature parity with what I want, but I just want that. And you ask the right questions. And when you ask the right question and you add the right mindset to your questions, then people start to change their answers, not to what they need, but what they want to solve. And that kind of discussion is a lot more productive and a lot more cost-oriented, right? Yeah. People like to jump to the conclusion of the solution versus like, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? Yeah. Exactly. And then you have to, argue the solution instead of argue about what you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And it's limiting you to what you have to suggest, right? I'm sorry it's high level, but eventually it's a feeling I got a lot.
Yeah. And you talk, well, so I do want to tell people who watch this, so they can, let me just share your LinkedIn profile so they know how to follow you, if that's okay. And then I also want to, if you want to, so this is people like just, this is you, and I'll share the LinkedIn, I'll share your URL in the write-up, but it's up here. And then remind me where your blog is, so people can, is it?
The link in my first job. So in Wix, if you go a bit down.
Yeah.
There it is.
See more.
There it is.
FinOps there it is. This one right here. So FinOps Israel. That's the blog. That's where people can go to follow up on you.
There's most of my content is on LinkedIn. I'm doing a lot of content, vlogs and whatnot. But this is something that I'm actually trying to write things in my blog to change mindset instead of just adding best practices or pro tips or whatever. I'm trying to create content that will change how people view this role.
I think you're making progress with that. It's working. That's how I found you, right? That's how I found you. Yeah. So then, what is your recommendation now? Look, I see a lot. So we have the FinOps Foundation. God bless them, and certifications. I see a lot of people going down that path and investing their time and careers into this FinOps capability, when I think on this call we just agreed on and discovered that maybe the wrong direction. So what's your recommendation to folks out there?
Well, this is a good question, and I want to be accurate. I don't think it's the wrong direction. I just think it's the beginning of the road. Like, you have to start at FinOps. You have to review, like, what's the low-hanging fruit? How can I bring value, from day one? How can I create that visibility? I'm going to answer in two ways, if that's okay.
Yes.
So, you said what my tip is for people who are starting that road. And I want to share 3 pillars that I'm working with that have been my guideline for the last 3 years, 5.5 years. Oh my God, 3 years. So much time has passed. The first one is visibility and monitoring. First of all, understand what kind of gaps you have in your visibility and what you want to monitor. The second pillar will be the design and optimization. Once you understand what you're looking for and how to measure it, then you want to understand how to create that architecture or the right optimization and redesign or optimize the workload. And the third pillar will be the education and mindset, like how we take that process and educate people to repeat that process again 4 months from now to the same agenda, which is amazing, right? Because what you want to do is to review if the same architecture that you discussed 4 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago is still relevant today and is still bringing the same success criteria or KPI, the same value. So this is the first tip that I want to share. The 3 pillars, and if you approach that, methodically, then it will be quite a common sense how to manage your projects. And the second one would be to don't ask how, ask why, because a lot of people focus on how, focus on, listen, you don't have to do that, you can do that. You don't have to run on that, you can run on that. You don't have to save that object, you can move it to colder storage. And no one asks, why is it in storage in the first place? What is the value it brings? Why are you running this outside the main cluster of our shared tenancy workload? Why do you have a different endpoint for our NAT gateway, for example? I don't know, right? It can be a lot of questions. But instead of asking, how can we do things? Ask, why do we do them? How does it bring value and generate business? And I think the answer, might surprise you.
Yeah. Why are we doing this in the first place? Like, oh, good question. Yeah. Okay.
Can I say something else about that? Because I had an amazing discussion with a lot of people internally at Wix. And they said that the KPI that we have to measure is justification. And I think it's completely wrong. Like, no one ever came to his manager and said, I need a license because right? There is
Yeah.
always a justification. The question is not if it's justified. The question is if this is the right approach. Does it change the current state and what is painful for us in the current state? And I think that changing that, not just look at the justification, because there will always be justification.
Yeah.
Asking why do we want to do, what are we trying to solve, will change the way that you handle your conversation internally in the company.
Yeah. Again, a culture change, right? Mindset. Yeah. I have a few more tactical questions left.
Go ahead.
And you mentioned, and then we can probably proceed to wrap up. And you mentioned mandatory tags. Yeah. And I think that's an unappreciated part when I talk to other engineering teams, because I don't see it enforced. And when you say mandatory, and why tags? Because it's relevant for you to collect your dashboards, right? Like without the tags, you may not get that information. So can you talk about why mandatory? And if you can, what are those mandatory tags and how do you enforce it?
Okay, so this is a very cool question because I really love that subject. I think that in my previous sessions, there's only one slide on that, and I always like half an hour talk about that.
Yeah.
When you talk about visibility on the cloud cost, it's very simple to understand what kind of services are the most expensive, what kind of usage type operation, which regions you're running at. And what is missing is the business justification, as we call it. You can understand you have 100 instances of R5s running, but you won't be able to understand what is running on them from the cost side. You'll have to investigate like under which VPCs is sitting, which security groups is attached to it. And there is there is no convenient way to understand the business side of your activities and your infra unless you use tags. And I think tags are the most important thing you have to do as a FinOps engineer or as a FinOps practitioner. The first thing you come to in your workplace, like understand what you want to visualize and then create mandatory tagging to achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. And that is why we have mandatory tags. Mm-hmm. And when I say we have mandatory tags, I'm going to have a bit of disclaimer here and say it's only in production. So we won't enforce it on like playground accounts, or we won't enforce it on POC accounts that we're running, mm-hmm. or user accounts that are running their own workload, because we can, by the name of the account or by any other means out of the box for Amazon, we don't have to tag it. We understand who the activity is for. Mm-hmm. But in the production, because it's a multi-tenant environment that everyone's running on, it is mandatory. Mm-hmm. We're using 5 mandatory tags, which are user-defined tags in Amazon, mm-hmm. and additional 3 that are out of the box from Amazon. Mm-hmm. So the mandatory tags that we defined, it's the same, by the way, in GCP without obviously the AWS tags. Yeah. It's called labels, not tags. There is a bit of limitation. You only can use lowercase without spaces, and mm-hmm. it's less convenient, but the purpose is the same. And in Amazon, we have a business unit, which is the team that is in charge of the provisioning. Mm-hmm. And this is a very, a very distinct way of defining it, because it's not the owners of the agenda, it's who provisioned it. And we have that separation. We have to, right? Because mm-hmm. you can't get answers from the one provisioning the infra if the request came from the owner of the agenda, right? Mm-hmm. The second one would be service role. What is the purpose of what kind of role is it playing in our infrastructure? And it can be, for example, an application server, it can be a DB server, it can be MySQL server, or the kind of type of server that you're running. It can be a Kafka cluster, Zookeeper, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's a kind of a description of what is running on that infra. Mm-hmm. So we have a business unit service role. The stack, like the technological stack, if it's production, if it's staging in the production, if the environment is just a POC that we're running, just to map like what is production and what is not production. Mm-hmm. And the owner, which is the owner of the agenda. So a PDL or a contact or a Google group that is, that is directing us to who requested it and that provisioned infra. And
that's still the second tag, the service role, or?
No, there is a business unit, which are the provisioners, service role, which is a short description of the agenda, the stack, which is production, POC, whatever, staging, and the owner, which is the one requested the agenda. Like the
got it. I want to make sure I have the first one. So I have the second one. That's the service role and the description of the service. The third one is the stack. The fourth one is the owner. What was the first one?
Business unit.
Business unit.
Who is the provisioner of the agenda? Like it can be the DB group or the DBAs. It can be infrastructure. It can be BI team. It can be data science. It can be whatever.
Yeah. So number one, business unit. Number two, service role. Number three, the stack. Number four, the owner. Fifth one?
Name.
We
have a name.
Yes.
So every resource has to have a name.
Yeah.
And many people know that it's actually a tag, right? So it is a tag, and you should enable it through the cost allocation tags.
Yeah.
3 out of the box Amazon tags that we're using. First one and most important, and if you're not using it, you should. Created by. AWS created by is a tag only relevant for cost. You won't see it in Cost Explorer, only in CUR. And once you enable it, it will show you the role used to provision the resource, which is pretty cool. Because if you have no idea who provisioned that resource, it is written in AWS. So even if you don't have tags and you enable it, you see the role of the one or the one that provisioned that resource. So AWS created by is one of the most powerful tags that we have to track and tagged resources.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is the auto-scaling group name to aggregate our information based on the auto-scaling group, and fleet request ID to monitor specific fleet IDs. We have several more, but I don't really remember them because I'm not really inherently use them. So
yeah. So cost tag, auto-scaling group name. What was the first one? The third one, request ID?
It was created by an auto-scaling group name and fleet request ID. That's the tags that we use.
Created by. Interesting. Okay. This will be super useful content for people out there. Like I'm going to write a little summary of this and publish it on LinkedIn and refer it to you. This is fantastic. Okay. And how come production only and not test? Too hard to enforce, not relevant, not spending as much in test, just not worth the effort?
It will correlate to what you asked before about how we enforce it. So I'm going to touch on how we enforce it, and then it will explain why we're not utilizing it in different accounts.
Yeah.
In the production, we built our own wrapper around Terraform. It's called InfraGod, and what it does, it has a built-in linter that is checking the code for the mandatory tags. And if you don't have the mandatory tags, it will fail your pull request. And the problem is that we only do it in production because we're not using InfraGod in different accounts. We only use it in production. And what we want to achieve is, first of all, that alignment that everyone will use that framework. But if it's a one user account that is doing something on the side, we don't want to enforce it, right? Mm-hmm. We know who the activity is for, and we can contact them if there is any issue, if they're above budget, whatever. So it's not mandatory outside of our production, but internally in the production, because it's a short tenancy workload, we have to be able to map the different type of agendas that are running in the production. So it has to be mandatory.
Understood. Yeah. And then if they don't use them, the pull will fail, right? So it's just like, yeah, makes sense.
So you can't provision resources without tags.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay. And gosh, I feel like we could go on forever here. I
can go on forever.
Yeah.
I really love it. I really love this role. I love this area of expertise because, it never ends, right? The technological stack, the pricing models, everything changes over time. And every time there is a new service or a new technology, it's like, you're always on your toes.
By the week, changes by the week. Yeah. So then wrapping up, what are your big aha moments in this journey And if there's going to be somebody else on the planet in your shoes tomorrow, today's Monday, they may have even started today, or they're going to start on April 1st. Like, what are your recommendations to them? Like, here are the 5 things or 3 things you should do immediately to be successful.
Okay, so this is a very good question. I'm going to answer your first question though first.
Yes.
If that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with a sentence, and I stand behind every word of it, and I'm sure that everyone will agree with me if they stop and think about it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's talking about 30% waste on the cloud. I'm saying that there is a 30% waste in your organization, not just the cloud. And that realization, occurred to me when I talked with my brother, who also works at Wix and is in charge of everything related to asset management and strategic operations, related to how we work with vendors and how we approach licensing and how we use different tools around Wix. And the thought came to mind that it's the same guidelines and the same best practices as we practice as FinOps engineers, right? We want to enable people. We want to help the company grow, but we also want to keep that financial KPI in check. Mm-hmm. And when people are purchasing licenses without asking the right questions, then you generate waste from the IT side and you generate waste from the asset management side. And there is such a term called asset management in companies, right? Yeah. But it's also a different department in the company. And there's a lot of knowledge sharing you can do, because what is asset management in IT if not FinOps for IT, right? And once that realization sank, we understood that we should open a new kind of team. And that team should be called, we borrowed the name from a cloud center of excellence. And we called it a financial center of excellence. It's FCOE. Mm-hmm. And it should govern like the operation side and procurement and BNC and FP&A and treasury and legal and the whole guild for operations across the company. And, to educate, to create best practices, to understand what guidelines we follow when we approach new agenda or when we talk to a vendor, how we approach negotiations, right? How do we ask the right questions? How do we understand if the model is fit for us? And it's exactly the same as in the cloud, right? It's the same questions. So we kind of thought about it and it blew our minds, like why no one thought about it before? Why not aggregate all that knowledge and information under one roof? Because it's the same job.
It's the same job. Yeah. Especially because cloud spend is probably the number 2 line item after payroll on any company's P&L, right?
Most definitely.
Yet they're not integrated. I'm sorry, what?
And the third one would either be marketing or IT.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely, right? And everything else rolls up under under some sort of finance function. Yet the cloud, let those, it makes all sense of the world. Yeah. Okay. And then,
right. So this is the first question you asked.
Yeah.
What is my vision? What do I offer to people starting this role in a new company?
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be awesome. First thing, get all the contracts. All the contracts. The biggest discounts you'll get in a company will not be from savings. It will be from contracts, right? So if it's Amazon EDP, if it's Google EDP, if there is a private pricing you want to, first of all, take a look, right? If it matches the commitment or you're way above the commitment, request for additional discount. I guarantee it will give you the most discount from phase 0. That's the first thing you have to do. Review the contracts that you have with the vendors. Second thing, make sure that everything is tagged no matter which cloud you're working on. Everything is that should be tagged and is able to be tagged, just tag it. Understand which vectors you want to aggregate the information based on, and based on that, just figure out which tags are mandatory to you. It doesn't have to be my tags. It can be like a client or a user and project, whatever. Decide which kind of tags you want to enforce in your company, and make sure everything is tagged. That's the second thing and most important thing, because you don't want to say our cost grew by 30%. You want to say our DB cost grew by 30%. You want to say our application layer costs grew by 30%. That's the second thing. So we have contracts. We have tags. Once you have that visibility, understand how you can create visibility based on monitoring. And this is kind of takes a lot of engineering effort. I understand. There are a lot of products out there that does it for you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But if you are using like Cloud Health or other vendor out there, I'm not recommending anything here. I'm just saying that it exists. You don't have to, think how to implement it.
Yeah.
Use it. Gather like the lowest hanging fruits that you find. What's the biggest cost that you have? What is running on that? What's the utilization? What's the business cause for that workload, right? And that's the first question you have to answer. And once you understand that, you can understand if it's optimized or not optimized. If it's not optimized, generate action items, add it to the next sprint. That's the third one. The fourth one is a bit more problematic than the last one, because as you advance with how you manage things and you gain more visibility, you have to ask harder questions. So the fourth one would be how we measure value. And this is a huge question inside an organization, because whenever users or engineers get an API endpoint or a pipeline to send data, they're going to send data, right? And if you can send everything here. So everyone's saying like tons of logs and tons of information.
Yeah.
I had a production service that people send debug information into. I mean, why? And it just cost us a fortune until we figure out what cost us a fortune. And this is a huge example of how to put value KPI on the data that is being processed in the platform that is being generated in the company.
Yeah.
If you can measure the value of data, and you have to, then you can understand not just if the infrastructure is being optimized, but if the data pipeline is being optimized as well, and how you measure the value of data. And that's the first one. And the fifth one, and the most important, is dedicate at least 20% of your job to be connected to that world. Educate yourself with new releases. Be connected, talk with your account manager, get a report for new releases on technical services, new services that are being provisioned, go to reInvent, explore, right? Understand and ask, understand that technical stack outside of what you're using. So eventually when you can come back to the company and say, listen, I know that until today we worked with this service, but if we'll work with that service, we can save 20% and gain more less operational overhead. And that is something that it's called being there are two words that I really like. It's TCO, the total cost of ownership per an agenda, and the ROI. Like, what is the return of investment of the job that we do? And if both of them are put into an equation, when you suggest a different tool and you present it to your company, you're going to gain a lot of good feedback about how to approach cost optimization, because you're not just trying to optimize the workload that exists, you're offering new and improved way to do things better.
Yeah, so you really have to have a finger on the pulse of the market, all the new services, right? How does that help me? Yeah. Ooh, I love that. But those are 5 very actionable recommendations. I love it. Okay.
I came prepared.
Yeah, I can tell. Dvir, this has been fantastic. I'm going to hit the pause button for the recording, but thank you so much. And I know we're going to talk a second time, because I know you have so much more knowledge here.
No problem. I'd love to.
Yeah.